Hello.
Here we go. We'll call this evening's meeting to order. It's the regular city council meeting for January 7th, 2020, our first one of the year. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bembas?
Here.
Mr. Blair?
Here.
Mr. Gillis?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mrs. Meldrum? No answer. Mr. Scarback?
Here.
Mayor Stoneburner?
Here.
All present except Mrs. Meldrum.
Move to excuse Alan Meldrum due to illness.
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Blair?
No.
Mr. Gillis?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Scarback?
No.
Mayor Stoneburner?
Yes.
Mr. Bembas?
Yes.
It's a type vote, motion fails.
At this time, we'll take a moment of silent prayer. Will everyone please stand for the pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented. Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We have an agenda. This evening's presentation is an audit report from McBride, Manley and Company, and Curtis McBride will be presenting this evening. Will take the podium, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Curtis McBride, and I'm a CPA for McBride, Manley & Company. We are the CPA firm that audits the city's books and records. I am the managing partner for our firm. I'm also our firm's governmental accounting and audit director. I've been with the firm for, it'll be 20 years this May. With me this evening is Brooke Troy. She was a part of our engagement team, and she was a critical part of the city's audit this year. Before I get into the slides, they'll be presented up here on the monitor, and I also handed out a physical copy if you'd like to follow that way, because I know sometimes it's hard to see up here. Before I get into the slides, I want to talk about our audit opinion first, which is actually the most important thing related to our audit. So there are three types of opinions you can receive from your auditor. There is what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion, which means that we believe your financial statements are reliable and they're in compliance with our professional standards. Then there's what we call a modified audit opinion, which means that we feel that they're, for the most part, they're in compliance, but there may be a few exceptions to that. And then there's what we call an adverse audit opinion, which means that we do not believe your financial records are reliable and they're not in compliance with our professional standards. So I am pleased to announce that for June 30, 2019, the City of Algonac did receive a clean or unmodified audit opinion from our firm. So, and just to clarify, that's just simply an opinion on the reliability of your financial records. The purpose of our audit is not to provide an opinion on the financial health of the city. That's not the focus of our audit. Now moving over to the slides. The first fund I want to talk about is the general fund. Now, the general fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes, state shared revenues, and then federal, state, and local grant monies. So the first slide we're going to look at here is actually the balance sheet for the general fund. So looking at the balance sheet, you can see the general fund had about $2,019,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year, had about $151,000 of liabilities against those assets, to finish the year with an ending fund balance of about $1,868,000. Now, to put that in perspective, the Michigan Department of Treasury recommends that at a minimum, your fund balance level be at about 10% of annual operating expenditures in the fund. And at the end of June 30, 2019, you were at 78%. So in my opinion, the city does have a solid, healthy general fund balance level. Moving on to the next slide. Here, we're looking at the general fund revenue and expenditure, so the income statement, if you will. Here, we're comparing 2018 to 2019. You can see that your total revenues for 2018 were actually up over $3 million, at $3,020,000, and for 2019, it was actually only $2,599,000. And that's because, if you recall, back in 2018, you did receive a $500,000 grant from the state for the seawall. So that really explains the difference in your revenues between 2018 and 2019. And again, you generated $2,599,000 in revenues during the year. And then if you look, you spent about $2,402,000 in the general fund during 2019, and actually finished the year with an increase to your fund balance level of about $197,000. Moving on to the next slide. Here we're looking at revenue specifically, again comparing 18 to 19. As I mentioned, your total revenues did go down, but that's because of that $500,000 grant you received in 18. You can see that for 2019, you generated about $1,321,000 in property tax revenues, so that was about 51% of your total revenues in the general fund. Some other major sources would be distributions from the state, so that's your state revenue sharing. You generated about $429,000 of that during the year. And then refuse fees of about $303,000 during the year. And as I mentioned, you generated $2,599,000 in total revenues. Moving on to the next slide. Here we're looking at general fund expenditures by type. Again, comparing 18 to 19. You can see that total expenditures actually did increase from 18 to 19. So you can see total expenditures went from $2,269,000 in 18 up to $2,402,000 in 2019. But that was intentional. If you recall, I believe it was in your December 2018 meeting, you guys actually approved to contribute an additional $155,000 to your pension to help fund some of the shortfall over in your pension funding. And just to clarify, your pension fund is currently at about 80% funded, which according to the state of Michigan is actually pretty healthy. So under state law, your pension is considered underfunded if it's 60%, if it's lower than 60% funded. So again, at 80% funded, you're in good shape in your pension. Also, when your retirees' health care, we call it OPEB, your retirees' health care is actually 100% funded, which is a really good position to be in for your municipality. A lot of municipalities are, believe it or not, 5 to 10% funded. So again, at 80% funding in your pension and 100% funded in your retirees' health care, you're in good shape in both of those areas. But the increase in your pension contribution during 2019 really explains the difference in your expenditures between 18 and 19. Moving on to the next slide. Now, the next two funds I'm going to talk about briefly are different, quite a bit different than the general fund. These are what we call special revenue funds. And we call them special revenue funds because their fund balance levels, their fund balances are actually restricted for a special purpose. And that's for the maintenance and construction of streets throughout the city. So looking at this is the balance sheet for the street funds, starting with the major street fund. You can see the major street had about $838,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. Didn't really have any significant liabilities against those assets, and finished the year with an ending fund balance of about $837,000. Now, the local street fund finished the year with about $333,000 of assets on hand, had about $54,000 of liabilities against those assets, and finished the year with total fund equity or fund balance of about $279,000. Now, looking at the next slide, which is the income statement for the street funds. Again, starting with the major street fund on the left, you can see it generated about $305,000 during the year. It spent about $212,000 and actually had an increase to its fund balance level of about $93,000. And as I mentioned in my previous slide, finished the year with $837,000 in ending fund balance. Now, to put that into perspective, that fund balance level is actually more than 100% of its operating expenditures during the year. So just like the general fund, your major street fund has a good, solid fund balance level. Now, the local street fund generated $344,000 of revenues during the year, spent about $350,000, and used up about $6,000 of its fund balance level to end with about $279,000 in ending fund balance. And that represents about 80% of your annual expenditure. So again, your local street fund also has a healthy fund balance level. The thing you need to keep in mind with these two funds is it's normal for their fund balance levels to fluctuate drastically from year to year, which is going to be different than your general fund. So in years when you have significant street projects going on, you're going to be using that fund balance level. And then in years when you don't, you're going to be building it back up. So these are going to fluctuate from year to year. Now, if you notice in the local street fund, you spent about $308,000 in what we call routine maintenance. So you actually did have some major projects going on in the local street fund during the audit year. So that was primarily the Washington and Mill Street to Cole Street project. That occurred during the 18-19 year. So that was really the lion's share of expenditures over the local street fund. Moving on to the next slide, I have a couple slides here where I'm getting into some trend analysis. This is state revenue sharing. So in the center column, that's the state sales tax revenue sharing that goes into the general fund. And then on the far right would be distribution to the street funds. So that's the money that the state of Michigan gives the major local street funds to help with the city streets. Here we're going back to 2013. So starting with revenue sharing, you can see you generated about $364,000 in revenue sharing in 13. That number came up to over $384,000 during 16, and now it's up over $428,000 for 2019. So a positive upward trend in state revenue sharing. You can see a very similar relationship with distributions to the streets. You had about $255,000 of that in 13. It went up over $300,000 for 2016, and you actually received about $466,000 in distributions from the state to your street funds during 2019. Now in the next slide, this is kind of an interesting slide. This is the property tax revenue trend. Here we're going back to 2013 also, so you can see your general fund generated about $1,235,000 of property taxes in 2013. That came down to about $1,179,000 in 2015, and has climbed back up to about $1,321,000 for 19. Now the interesting thing about this is if we took this further back, so for instance, if we went back to 2009, you actually received about $1,615,000 in property taxes that year. So even though you've gone up to $1,321,000 in 19, that's still $293,000 less in property taxes that you had to work with in 19 than you did back in 2009. Now that doesn't mean that the property values in the city are that much down from where they were in 2009. Those are primarily because of the constitutional limitations that have been placed on property taxes. So you have Proposal A, which limits taxable value growth to individual properties to the lesser of 5% or inflation, and then you have the Headley Amendment, which is almost like a double whammy, which gets the city as a whole and limits the growth. So if you remember back in 2010 or 2011, we had a recession. We had a little bit of a housing market crisis. So what happened is in a very short period of time, home values fell sharply, some by as much as 25 or 30%. So the tax base went with it. So people were paying much less in property taxes. But because of those constitutional limitations I just described, it's taking a long time for those taxable values to climb up back to where they were before the recession. And actually this situation has been devastating for some municipalities, but you guys have been able to budget well in anticipation of the loss in revenues, and you've done a great job in maintaining your healthy fund balance level. And that actually gets me to my next slide, which is the general fund balance trend. So again, going back to 2013, you can see at about $1,298,000 in ending fund balance that year. Went up to $1,642,000 in 16. It did drop to $919,000 in 2017, but that was intentional. That was the year you spent $800,000 for the seawall project, and then you can see in 2018 it climbed back. Your fund balance went back to 1.6 because you received that grant in 2018. And as I mentioned in my previous slide, your fund balance level in your general fund sits at $1,868,000, which is healthy. Now the next, I want to talk about two funds really briefly. The last two funds, the water and sewer fund. These funds are quite a bit different than the general in the street funds. These are what we call proprietary funds or enterprise funds. And we call them that because they're accounted for more similar to that of a private business because of how they generate their revenues. So the city bills the city residents for the use of the water and sewer system. So theoretically, it's supposed to be self-sustaining. Here we're looking at the balance sheet. If you look at the sewer on the left, you can see it had about $2,845,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. It had total liabilities against those assets of about $361,000 to end the year with a total net position of about $2,485,000. Now you can see various categories of net position here on the bottom. The one you really want to focus on is the unrestricted net position. That's similar to the general fund balance. So that basically represents your net position that's not tied up in those long-term assets of the plants themselves. That can't be easily converted to cash. So your unrestricted net position in your sewer fund's about $482,000, and that's about 71% of operating expenses in that fund. So again, that's healthy. It's a solid unrestricted net position or fund balance level, if you will. Looking at the water fund, you had about $9,512,000 of assets on hand, total liabilities of about $825,000, and then you finished the year with a total net position of about $8.6 or $8.7 million. But again, focusing on that unrestricted portion, you ended the year with just over $1 million, which is about 87% of your annual operating expenses. So again, in my opinion, water and sewer fund have healthy unrestricted net position or fund balance levels. Now the last fund slide I want to talk about is the income statement for these two funds. You can see the sewer fund generated about $468,000 during the year. It spent about $540,000 in, you actually used some of your fund balance level, about $70,000, but again, you do have a healthy net position at $2,485,000. Your water fund generated $962,000 during the year. You actually had a slight increase to your fund balance level, about $76,000 during the year. And as I mentioned, you ended the year with a total net position of about $8.6 or $8.7 million in the water fund. Now, my next couple of slides, I just want to spend a minute or two talking about our audit process in general. So, what are we actually doing when we're here? What are we doing behind the scenes? What is our audit involved? Well, our audit process focuses on all what I call the major accounting functions. So this would be purchasing, cash receipts, utility billing, adjusting journal entries, payroll, and bank reconciliation. So, for instance, in purchasing, we're actually pulling samples of invoices and making sure that they're appropriate expenditures for the city. They're allowed under state law. That someone has checked them for accuracy. We're also obviously making sure they're being posted properly to the general ledger so that your financial records are accurate. And we're also making sure that we're actually looking at council minutes and looking at your packets to make sure that all purchases are eventually getting approved by you, the council. That's obviously a very important internal control step. Cash receipts is a big one. Obviously, cash is always the riskiest thing when it comes to an audit, and obviously in a modern business environment, there isn't a lot of real green cash anymore changing hands. But the bottom line is, we're checking and making sure nothing happens to cash from the time it gets to, here at the city office to the time it gets to the bank. We're checking to make sure that cash receipts are actually getting to the bank. Utility billing is a big one. We're checking samples, making sure residents are being billed for proper usage, and that they have been billed by, with rates that have been approved by you, the council. Payroll is a big one. We're actually looking at samples of payroll, making sure that city employees are being paid for time actually spent working, and that they're being paid by rates which have been approved by council. And also, obviously, we're doing other procedures year-end. year-end reconciliations to put this document together, which you should have received a couple weeks ago. Now my final slide. We're in contact with the city throughout the year, obviously primarily Linda. We have a really good relationship with the city. We assist with questions regarding transactions throughout the year. This allows us to identify any potential accounting or auditing issues early. We also assist with various state filings and compliance requirements. So Act 51 for the street funds, we actually prepare and submit the F-65, which I always explain to people, it's almost like a tax return for a municipality. We also provide support for the sales tax information for state revenue sharing that is submitted to the state. So during the year, we spent about 450 hours of time between July 1st, 2018 and June 30, 2019. We spent about 450 hours of time working on the audit and then working on the rate studies and then various consulting services for the city during the year. And that's really all I have. Again, we have a great relationship. The fact that we're in contact with Linda throughout the year is great. From our standpoint, the worst thing would be coming in after the year is over and then having surprises. That's obviously not what we prefer. So we're happy to be available and to communicate with the city throughout the year.
Thank you. I imagine this will change next year when we get all the costs for high water in there, so we will see a change in our fund balance from that, but.
I'd like to thank McBride Manley for doing this for us every year. Another stellar job.
Yes.
Yep, a big shout out to our city manager as well and our administrative staff. And I think our city council should get a pat on the back for doing such a great job and such a fiduciary responsibility for our city.
It's a monumental task, I know, and I can tell when it's audit time, when I come in here. The energy level changes just a little bit. But thank you, Mr. McBride, and
Thank you, Linda.
Linda Mackey, without you, look at the money you save us. I'm gonna give you my checkbook, We really appreciate it. I understand that, but you're a big part of that, and Mrs. Gerstenberg's there, our department heads, I know, help along the way, and as Curtis said, this is an ongoing thing all year long. It's not just this report at the end. But what I like is this, instead of trying to figure out this, so I appreciate that very much. Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to thank Curtis and the staff and thank Linda and administration for their efforts on behalf of all of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
I've been on council a little bit less than Ray, 7 years, but it's almost like we hear the same good news every year and the same, perfect audits with Linda every year. And it's one thing that our community does not have to worry about because our finances are in good hands. And we do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis.
At this time, it's our public comment section of our meeting. Remember, if you care to speak, state your name, where you live, and you're limited to 5 minutes. Anyone?
Hello, I'm Dan Stewart from 9235 Folkert Way, and I just want to take a moment and thank the community for their generosity over the Christmas season. I had a chance to just interact with a few of the residents and that have benefited from the kindness. Of course, the city event that was here in this facility. Thank you, Fire Chief and Mac Alive for that great family event. The good fellows who were so absolutely generous with our families in need. Of course, they simply facilitated the generosity of our community. That was so gracious. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you. Council, you guys always are looking out for the good of our people in our community. But just all those that either are listening or are here or watching the video, I just want to say thank you for being a very generous community. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Next, we'll have our city managers report.
Thank you, Mayor Stoneburner. The only thing I have today is to piggyback on what council had said and to thank Linda Mackey and Linda DeBoyer and Annie Panessa for all of their help with the audit. They work really hard, and obviously what they do shows, so we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and next, we're to approve our consent agenda, which consists only of our meeting minutes from our last meeting, December 17th, 2019. May I have a motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We've approved our consent agenda. We have no unfinished business, so we'll get right into the new business. We're being asked to approve the purchase of a unit heater for the raw water pump house. It's stopped and the cost of repairs prohibit the option for repairs. May I have a motion, please?
I resolve to make a motion for payment to Tony's Heating and Cooling, whose address is 6075 Corporate Drive in Ira, in the amount of $2,185 for a new unit heater.
Support.
Discussion? One of the things I noticed that this unit heater is going to be smaller than the one they're taking out, so it should help in replacing the old one. And that saves us some money that way by going with the smaller one, although it is a more powerful one. It's
More
just a
efficient.
small, yeah, more efficient. Any other comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Scarbeck,
Yes.
Mayor Stoneburner,
Yes.
Mr. Bembas,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next, we're going to look at our federal poverty guidelines that determine the poverty exemptions for 2020. Each year, we're required to adopt the guidelines to set those income levels, and they're updated annually by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And in the past, the city's policy has been to accept the federal government's recommendation. Our assessor, Jeanette Kuhn, has asked us to use those guidelines and adopt this resolution. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 2020-01 for the 2020 poverty exemptions and direct the city clerk to sign the resolution on behalf of the city.
Second.
Roll call, or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Scarbeck,
Yes.
Mayor Stoneburner,
Yes.
Mr. Bembas,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next, we're looking at the annual MDOT performance resolution for 2020 to allow the city to work within the state's right-of-way. We're required annually to adopt this. It allows our city manager, Denise Gerstenberg, and our DPW foreman, our DPW foreman, Joe Vernier, to apply to MDOT for any necessary permit to work in the city's, or in the state's highway right-of-way. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion we adopt the 2020 Michigan Department of Transportation Performance Resolution for governmental agencies, hashtag 2020-02, and direct the city clerk to sign and submit the resolution on behalf of the city.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Scarbeck,
Yes.
Mayor Stoneburner,
Yes.
Mr. Bembas,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next, we're going to look at an appointment to the Planning Commission. According to our charter, I have the ability as mayor to make a recommendation and with your approval. And at this time, I would like our council to approve Richard Arpan to the Planning Commission. Rich is a longtime citizen of Algonac, a resident of Algonac. He is very involved in our community, in the Little League, in the Boy Scouts, and we all know about the chili cook-off. but he's been very involved. He's retired from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which we've heard a lot about these last few months, getting reports from them. May I have a motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Richard R. Pan to the Planning Commission for a term that begins immediately and ends July 17th, 2020.
Support.
Discussion?
I think it's the perfect pick.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? You're on. Welcome aboard. Thank you very much for stepping up. Next, we're to consider reappointments to our Board of Review. Our process for reappointments is that our city clerk contacts the current members to see if they would like to continue on in that in the reappointment for another 2-year term, or another term. And first up, we're gonna talk about Chuck Bailey's term on the City of Elginak Board of Review, which expires, it expired yesterday. Mr. Bailey has contacted the city clerk and indicated he'd like to be on for another 2 years. May I have a motion for the Board of Review and Chuck Bailey?
I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Chuck Bailey to the Board of Review with a 2-year term ending January 6th, 2022.
Support.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Chuck, you got another 2 years. Next, we're looking at Bill Erdman's term on the City of Elginak Board of Review, which expired yesterday again. And he does would like to stay on the board and be reappointed for another 2 years. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to reappoint Bill Erdman to the Board of Reviews with a 2-year term ending in January 6, 2022.
Support.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Bill, you're on another 2 years, and congratulations on your retirement. I just read about it the other day, so it gives you more time to spend here in the city with us. Or Bill, for Bill. Now, we have to approve our accounts payable and payroll in the amount, well, I'll let the motion decide the amount. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion to approve accounts payable and payroll in the amount of $142,533.43.
No second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Scarba?
Yes.
Mayor Stoneburner?
Yes.
Mr. Bembas?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mrs. Gerstenberg, what are our next items for our next agenda?
Thank you, Mayor Stoneburner. It looks like for January 21st, we will have an invoice for repairs to our leaf vacuum. We will have an introduction to an amendment to the blight ordinance, the award for the engineering consulting services, and reappointments to the ZBA.
Okay, thank you. Council comment. We'll start with Councilman Martin.
As I listened to the audit, I got to thinking about where we are presently and how we got there. And we have had great administrative leadership, prior city managers, helped us get through some tough times and kept our state afloat. And we're in good shape, and thank you, Curtis, the audits have helped, and thank you, Linda. But we gotta remember our past, how we got here.
Absolutely.
Councilman Scarbick.
I just want to wish you guys all a happy New Year's, and I want to say there's a lot of things coming in 2020 that we should be excited for. And I just wanted to thank everybody involved in the audit. You guys did an amazing job, and I think next year will even be better. Thank you.
Councilman Blair.
Again, shout out to McBride Manley. You guys do a great job. Linda, phenomenal like always. Our administrative staff, our city manager. None of it goes unnoticed, but it's good to be known for it. And again, I think our city council has really come together to make some strong decisions that are going to be the betterment of our city. Let's move on from that. Let's talk about this 80s party on Saturday. Oh yeah, I expect to see at least some of you there. I know all of you won't, but expect to see some of you for sure. That should be a good time. I'm sure somebody else will talk about it a little bit more. We have a Gatsby party, I believe, coming up, again, in February. We won't get too far ahead of ourselves. I hope everybody had a safe New Year, Merry Christmas. Thank you all for coming out, and I hope to see you Saturday.
Mayor Pro Tem Gillis.
I'd like to thank Linda and the entire team for the great audit. Also, Mr. Arpan, welcome to the Planning Commission. And last night, Mayor Stoneburner, Councilman Bembas, and I got to attend the fire department meeting. I'd like to thank the guys for having us there. It was really educational to see those guys come together and see the passion that they have for our community. So I really appreciate everything that they do. And with that, everyone have a good night.
Councilman Bembas.
Tomorrow morning, when you get your Algonac Voice newspaper, and I know it's actually the Downriver Voice, but most times it's got Algonac on the front page. You'll have 2 articles on the front page. One is about our 80s party, that's on the 11th, and one is about the Mardi Gras party for Women's Life on the 25th. Don't forget the chili cook-off. I know that last year, Joe Doan, what prize did you win last year?
Kathy Doan.
They came in,
They came in first responders.
Okay, that's what it was. I know they had real good chili, and everybody has good chili. Somebody tried to, I think, kill me because they had some ghost chili kind of stuff, and I was like, oh my God, that was hot stuff. But 80s party benefits Algonac Alive. We do things in the community, like getting lights for the boardwalk and things like that. Chili Fest. Oh, there's something else I want to say, and I forget. Oh, and the fire department. Thank you, Joe Doan, for having us there. You know, the one thing I noticed about the meeting with the fire department, we sat up there with them for about an hour and a half, is we have a dedicated and committed group of people of various ages as part of our fire department, and just talking to these gentlemen and the commitment that they have is actually a generational thing, too, with people and their sons and mentors, old enough to be their grandpas, and a lot of good people there, and it gave me a whole new insight into what they do, but they did not let me slide down the pole, but maybe next year. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank the fire department for inviting us. It was a lot of fun to reminisce, talk about what's happening now and what you hope for in the future, and that was wonderful. And we saw the passion from the men there, and it just kind of oozed out while we were eating. It wasn't just the venison stew; it was more than that, and it's nice that it's being carried on, and as Mike said, it's generational, and you can see that happening, and it's wonderful. So if you're listening to this and you have a desire to be committed and have a passion for firefighting and be involved in the community, we're looking for a few good men and women. So come on down and see our chief, Joe Doan. You'd have a great group of people to work with. So also, thank you for our administrative team for all that they've done on the audit, Linda and your team, the department heads. I know it's not just one person that does it all, and sometimes it happens, it feels like it's 24/7. Maybe Linda, you can breathe a little and go home before 9:30. You could go home maybe at 8:30 at night instead. I see the light on. I see you working. I imagine you're not playing solitaire on your computer. So anyway, thank you, and thank you, McBride and Manley. It's wonderful working with you. We're able to understand your report. You get to put it in terms that we understand most of it, and I appreciate that. Piggyback a little bit on what Councilman Blair was talking about with the Mardi Gras coming up. That's on January 25th, and it's Women's Life 883 putting it on. It'll be at the Lions Club. It's a murder mystery fundraiser dinner, and I know I've been to some murder mystery fundraisers, and they're a lot of fun and very interesting. $35 a ticket includes your dinner, and it's a cash bar. It's at like I said, at our own Lions Club. And they always have a fundraiser for something. This one is for our Elginak High School National Honor Society. They want a water station for the high school. They're very conscious of all the water bottles everybody's using, and this way you can refill your water bottles. And I know we see more and more of those out in the communities when we're shopping and everything, they have those. And it's wonderful to bring your own water bottle and be able to fill it up and leave. And they want this for the kids, and I know it's very successful in many schools. If you need a ticket, you see Cindy Babish, Paula Burgess, or Karen Blair, and Karen's at the high school, so. Anyway, with that, Corey, may I have a motion to
You will,
adjourn?
but I forgot one thing which I think is important, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it up. Algonac was voted in, what paper was it?
Only in your state.
Only in your state, to be the 9th coziest place to visit. Look at that, in the whole state. I think that's kudos to everything we've done around here, that's a great thing. Now I can adjourn.
Okay.
Okay? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.